What's up, guys? Welcome back to OG Sports TV and welcome back to another episode of Real Talk. We just had the NFL wildcard weekend. There were 6 games, and they definitely didn't go entirely as me or some other people thought, but they were fun nonetheless. And let's get into it with the first game, the Bills versus the Colts in Buffalo. The Bills took this one 27 to 24. I thought that the Bills would win, and I thought the game would be close, and that's what we got. It was really interesting to see how this played out because really in the first half, the Colts looked like the better team. They had a more of a defined plan on offense. They were getting to Josh Allen on defense, and the coverages they were playing in defense really confused them. They were switching from a single high safety in cover three to two high safeties in cover two. They were going back and forth, and Josh Allen didn't really know. He was getting confused. He didn't really know what to do. That really changed in the second half because he started to figure it out, and they really can't do it. You can see that on the Stephon Diggs touchdown at the start of the fourth quarter, when the single high safety in cover three shaded over left, shaded over left, when Stephon Diggs is on man coverage on the right side. So he's on an island. You can't do that. Stephon Diggs is one of the best route runners in the NFL, and you leave him on an island with this corner. It's just a mismatch every time. Almost doesn't matter who it's against. So, and something I wanted to touch on, even in the first half, it's like, as I said, the Colts were the better team, and the Bills went into halftime with the lead. It's so the Bills are the type of team that can win even when they're not playing a good game, and that's so huge for them as they go on this playoff run. Josh Allen really turned it on in the second half, and I think that they can really make a run for this. Something that was a question going into this game was if Stephon Diggs and Cole Beasley were going to be in this game for their own separate health reasons, but they both came in, and you really saw that impact. I mentioned the Stephon Diggs touchdown earlier. He had 6 catches for 128 yards and that huge touchdown in the fourth quarter. He really energized the team. And Cole Beasley was just a pure chains mover. He caught all 7 of his targets for 57 yards. And 57, and you're going to look at that, and it's not a huge yards total, but he was really integral with Josh Allen. He used him almost as a security blanket in this game. 7 targets, was second on the team to Diggs, so you can tell he was looking his way a lot. So it was a really impressive performance by the Bills. The one thing I will say to criticize them is that they don't have a rushing threat other than Josh Allen. Devin Singletary had 3 rushing attempts. Zach Moss had 7, and they only had about 20 yards. So that's going to be a problem. That's going to be a problem if they meet the Chiefs in the AFC Championship, for example. Because, yeah, it's going to be probably a very high-scoring game against the Chiefs, but if you're going out there and you're throwing every time, and say you have a quick 3 and out, you got to keep Mahomes on the sideline for a little bit longer. You can't give him more opportunities. So I think that's something they have to find another rushing threat opposite Josh Allen. He's the only one that can really run the ball on that offense, and it was good enough today to beat the Colts. Will it be good enough next week to beat the Ravens? We'll see. But I think that's something to look forward to in their future matchups. Now, on to the next game. The next playoff game of the weekend was the Rams visiting Seattle to take on the Seahawks. And this game was so surprising to me because the Seahawks just came out, and this is the worst Seahawks performance I've seen in a really long time. And they had no direction. Russell Wilson was trying really hard to force it to DK Metcalf all game. And credit to DK Metcalf, he had a good game, 5 catches for 96 yards and 2 scores, but he had 11 targets. He had 5 catches on 11 targets. And you could tell, look at the pick 6. Look at the pick 6 that Russell threw. He's trying to force it to Metcalf too much, and you can't do that when he's being played by Jalen Ramsey. And it wasn't Jalen Ramsey that got the pick 6, but if you look at that play, it was telegraphed, and the corner knew exactly what was about to happen. That was a pick made in film. That was a pick made in film study because he knew exactly what was happening. So, I think that they really messed up. I mentioned in the last video that they needed to try to involve Tyler Lockett more because of Jalen Ramsey's presence, and they didn't do that. Tyler Lockett had about 4 targets and 2 catches, And I really think he had this one catch on the sideline, one-handed on good coverage, and it's like, why don't you target him more? With especially with the caliber of player that's on DK Metcalf, I think they really missed an opportunity, and I don't understand why they didn't do it. So I think I think it was, but overall, it was that combined with just the absolute presence of the Rams defense. Aaron Donald was in the backfield the entire game. The Rams secondary was lights out, even on the deep touchdown to Metcalf. They had an incredible game. And the Rams, it really looked like the Rams just wanted this more. And I mentioned in the last video again that the Rams really needed this win to legitimize the Jared Goff and the Sean McVay era. And this is huge for them. Jared Goff didn't even start this game. He came out because John Wolford, please, prayers up to John Wolford. I hope you heal very quickly. But Jared Goff didn't even start this game. He's a bum hand. I think it was a thumb surgery he had. He has a bum hand. And he came out, and granted, he was hurt, so he didn't have an incredible game. But he did enough. Did enough on the road to win a playoff game against the team that won your division. And a team that's dominated your division for the last decade. So it's a bad look for Seattle. It's a bad look for Russell Wilson. It's a bad look for Pete Carroll. Nothing's going to change up there as far as those two are concerned. But it's just how could this happen? How could you? Losing is one thing, but it's the way that you lost. You looked absolutely lost out there. Absolutely lost. You didn't know. It's like you never played this team before, but it was the third time you played them this year, and you weren't ready for the way that they came out on defense. It's really bad look for Seattle, and I'm really surprised at them. But shout out to Sean McVay, shout out to Jared Goff. They do what they had to do, and they win. It's a very huge playoff win for them, and we'll see what they can do next week in Lambeau against the Packers. This defense, as I said, defense travels, so they'll have a shot. It's gonna be tough. But they have a shot. On to the next game. Saturday night game was the Tampa Bay Bucs in Washington to play the football team. The Bucs won this game 31-23, but man, what a gutsy, what a willful performance by Taylor Heinicke, 27-year-old quarterback out of ODU. Shout out to Virginia. Man, he gave them everything he had, and it was such a just inspiring type of performance. And I really thought that the defense was going to come out and be hyped up by that. I thought that was going to energize them to come out and make some plays, maybe get a turnover or two more than they did. It didn't end up happening. The Tampa Bay offensive line had just a masterclass today, even against the quality that Washington has on their defensive front seven. And that was the difference in the game. It really was, because the way that Washington wins this game beforehand, not knowing how Taylor Heinicke was going to come out, the way that Washington wins this game is they keep Brady on the ground, they make him uncomfortable, and they don't let him make throws. They sack him, they turn him over. That was the way they win this game, and they needed to win an ugly game, and it didn't end up playing out like that. But man, shout out to Taylor Heinicke for keeping them in this game. Eventually, Tom Brady's playoff experience showed through, and they have too many weapons on that Bucs offense, and eventually it just broke through. The Washington front seven did not get home enough to allow Washington to continue playing zone, and Washington doesn't want to. They want to play zone against Tom Brady because hopefully their front seven can get home, and he doesn't have time to break down man coverage. But they ended up having to play man because their pressure wasn't getting home, and you could see that that's not how they want to play. And their wide receivers on Tampa were too good. They're man beaters. They're too good. You can see it on the Chris Godwin touchdown. It's just they don't want to play man against this team, but they ended up having to because their pressure wasn't getting home enough to make a difference. So, and you can see that that's normally how they play, because since Week 11, Washington is tied second in the NFL with 14 takeaways, and they only had one tonight. It was a Keyshawn Vaughn fumble that it didn't end up meaning much. So tough break for them. They were just beaten by a better team, and there's no shame in that. And Washington was really playing with house money. They really weren't supposed to be in the playoffs this year, and they really gave their all against a Bucs team that's just set up better. They have better players and a Hall of Fame quarterback. So it is what it is for them. But shout out to Taylor Heinicke. What a game! You really solidified yourself a spot in the league next year. And the Bucs are moving on to play New Orleans. That's gonna be tough. We're gonna see how that goes. They got smoked by the Saints twice in the regular season, but anything can happen in the playoffs. So we'll see how that goes. On to the next one. The first game on Sunday was the Ravens visiting the Tennessee Titans. The Ravens took this game 20-13, and the first half of this game played out kind of the way that the first half of the Bills-Colts game did. The team that eventually won the game was the team that didn't play very well in the first half. The Ravens didn't play that well in the first half, but they went into halftime tied at 10, and that just shows you the type of teams that when teams like that can win when they're not playing well, that makes them really dangerous. But this was a grinded out type of game, and the driving point of this game, the reason why the Ravens win this game, is because they took away Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry had 18 carries for about 40 yards. He was a non-factor, and when that happens, the Titans essentially don't have an answer. Their whole offense is built off the greatness of Derrick Henry, and Ryan Tannehill has been great. Shout out to Ryan Tannehill for coming to Tennessee and resurrecting his career, but most of his success has come off play action because of the threat of Derrick Henry. They have a legitimate Hall of Fame running back there, and that makes everything easier for Ryan Tannehill when you have good targets like A.J. Brown and Corey Davis to throw to. But when they take away Derrick Henry, you have nothing. You have nothing, because this is the exact same way that the game in Lambeau against the Packers happened a couple of weeks ago. Granted, that game was a little bit different. They were on the road. It was snowing, so you kind of throw that one out as an outlier. But it's the same way that this game happened. They took away Derrick Henry. Corey Davis was a non-factor, and you're kind of hoping that Ryan Tannehill and A.J. Brown can do it by themselves, and it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough, and eventually Lamar Jackson, he had a kind of a tough day throwing the ball, but he came out and he was effective as a rusher, and he ran for that highlight reel touchdown, and shout out to the Ravens. They won this game. And they did exactly what they had to do. They did what a lot of people struggled to do during the regular season, was contain Derrick Henry. He rushed for 2,000 yards, and that's not a small thing. So, and something that I mentioned in the last video was the revenge factor. I mean, these two teams, they're not in the same division, but they played each other three times in the last 2 years, and you could tell that they don't like each other. At the end of the game, not a whole lot of them shook hands after the game, and that's rare these days. So, shout out to the Ravens. They got their revenge. They're moving on. They're playing the Bills next week, which should be a really fun game. We'll see what happens. I'll talk more about that in a video coming out later this week, the divisional round preview. But the Ravens take this game 20-13. They took away Derrick Henry, and Titans couldn't do anything about it. On to the next one. The afternoon game on Sunday, the Bears visiting New Orleans to play the Saints. The Saints took this game 21-9, and it was a lot closer than me and a lot of people thought it was. Credit to the Bears for coming out and really playing their butts off on defense, and that was the reason that they were in this game for a long time. It was 7-3 in favor of the Saints for a very long time. And the Bears defense really, really kept them in this game. And the Bears they missed their opportunities. They had that one long touchdown opportunity that wide receiver Wims dropped inexplicably in the end zone, and I think when you miss opportunities like that against a really good team on the road, then you're not giving yourself a whole lot of chances. So Mr. Trubisky, he is what he is. He wasn't ever gonna go on the road to New Orleans and put up enough points to beat them. Granted, the Saints only scored 21 points, but that's enough. That's enough when you have the defense that they have, and when you're playing against an offense that with the Bears, that their only real strength
is running the ball, and the Saints' defensive strength is stopping the run. So in that game, it was always the Saints were always going to win this game. It was closer than me or other people thought because of just the effort and the will that the Bears defense showed. So shout out to them, but it didn't end up being enough. The Saints pulled away in the fourth quarter, mostly because the Bears defense was on the field for most of the second half. They were gassed because the Bears couldn't sustain a drive on offense, and they didn't give themselves much of a chance. So Saints win this game, and something I want to mention about the Saints is that their depth really showed. That Michael Thomas finally got in there. He finally scored a touchdown after really not playing a whole lot of this year. But Deontay Harris for the Saints had 7 targets, and he really was a factor. Deontay Harris, remember him next week against the Bucs, because it's not just Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara. The Saints have a lot of players that can hurt you. Jared Cook doesn't look like he's washed up anymore. Somehow he's showing out in the playoffs, and Drew Brees is on a mission. So the Bucs defense next week is if they come out and they play like the Bears just did, then they have a chance. But we'll see what happens. Saints take this game against Chicago 21-9. On to the next one. Last game of the weekend was the Cleveland Browns visiting the Pittsburgh Steelers in what was probably the most surprising result of the weekend. And the reason that is surprising is not because the Browns won, because the Browns are a good team, very capable of winning on the road against the Steelers, but it's the way that the Browns run, the way that the Browns won this game. In the first quarter, at the end of the fourth quarter, they were up 28-0. 28-0, because the Steelers just came out and they laid an egg in the first half. They just essentially they spotted the Browns 14 points in a blink in the beginning of the first quarter. It's just mistake filled football, and it's just and then the Browns almost never looked back. Momentum is a real thing, especially in the course of one game. The the Steelers gave the Browns too many opportunities, and the Browns were clinical. The Browns were clinical. That's a word that you hear in soccer circles. That means that they were provided opportunities and they took them. They didn't waste them, and they were clinical today. So the Browns, and they really they. This is the game that inspired. Obviously, this is the game that inspired the intro to this video. They rallied. They had an us versus the world type of mentality. Not many people thought they would go in there and win this game, even though they are a good team. Their head coach wasn't there um, because of COVID protocols, and but don't tell them that they came out there and they wanted it more. It was like the Rams. The point I made with the Rams and the Seahawks, they wanted this game more than the Steelers did. They did, and they looked like they were very well coached, and they didn't make very many mistakes. And even though they kind of cooled off after that first quarter explosion, they still dropped almost 50 points on this Steelers team that has an incredible defense. So, shout out to the Browns. First playoff win in a very long time. Something that is concerning for them is they gave up 37 points, and one of those was a garbage time touchdown at the very end of the game. But still, they gave up 37 points, and they're playing the Chiefs next week. So, that might be tough if you're giving up 37 points and you're up against Patrick Mahomes next. But anyway, that's something we'll talk about in the next video, my divisional round recap. Um, something to mention is the future of Big Ben in Pittsburgh. He had 4 interceptions today. Granted, a couple of those were off tipped balls, but still, he didn't have a good game. He played really badly against a team that he's dominated for his career. So, will he be there next year? He has a huge cap hit. I think it's about $41 million next year, and teams can find a way to get around the salary cap issues. But I don't know. If this is this the last that we see of him in Pittsburgh? We'll see. Um, that will wrap up my wildcard recap. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and or comment down below. If you want to see more content in the future, including my division round recap coming up this week, then please hit the subscribe button. It really helps me out. Shout out to all my OGs out there, and remember, be kind to someone today.